What's going on, Remix Sports Nation? Welcome to episode 8 of Talkin' Track. I'm your host, Armani DePaul, the voice of FMU Athletics, writer for the Daily Downforce, and occasional announcer for the FARA Racing Series. So, we had a pretty big weekend for racing with the Chicago Street Race, Lewis Hamilton breaking his winless streak. So many things going on in racing, and I could talk about that. I could talk specifically about Chicago. I could talk about Lewis Hamilton finally getting his first win in almost 3 years. I could talk about IndyCar's new hybrid system. Or I could talk about Pato O'Ward getting his first official win, crossing the finish line first, in 2 years. Plenty of topics to discuss. But as you guys should know at this point with this show, I don't like to go with the status quo. We're going to kind of hit little things here and there that happened this weekend, but it's all going to fall under one theme. And then, of course, we'll have what we usually bring you guys, our race weekend roundup, and then we'll give you guys what's in store for the coming week. So, without any further ado, let's dive right in. Okay, this is this week's edition of Podium Perspective. Typically, if you are working in an industry, whether that's executive, or you're a competitor, or even to an extent a media personality in a specific industry, really going after the fans is pretty much a no-go. I mean, the last thing you want to do is you want to go after the fans that you're trying to bring in. So people outside the industry, and I mean, when I mean by outside the industry, I mean people who don't work in the industry. We kind of have that freeway that we can kind of go after whatever we want. And as you guys should know at this point with this show, no one is safe from my rants. Whether it's the industry itself, media personalities, competitors, even fans. And this one, I'm going to go after the fans. Kind of in a positive, but it's going to come off like a little bit of a rant. It feels like every episode I've been doing the past 2 or 3 have come off like a rant. But today's Podium Perspective is going to be about change in racing. I have never, in any sport that I have been a fan of, that I've covered, anything, I have never seen a fan base more opposed to change than motorsports fans. Motorsports fans, they hate change. I truly believe that. Now, not all racing fans hate change, but a large vocal, I'm even want to go as far as saying majority of fans, they do not like change. They want to keep things status quo. Whatever works, keep it that way. Don't touch it or go back to what was before because it worked back then, back in the day, which to me always puzzled me because of any sport in the world. No sport is more susceptible to change than auto racing. Sure, you can have your NFL football where, you know, you change a couple rules here and there, and yeah, you're going to notice a visible difference on the field, but overall, it's still the same. It's still going to look more or less the same to a casual, to someone who's just entering the sport for the first time. They are really not going to notice the change on the field compared to change in racing. Because change in racing happens almost every single day. I mean, just the racing from just 2 years ago in that, 2-3 years ago in NASCAR looks nothing different. The cars are completely different. Even just the racing from 2 years ago is completely different. We had 19 winners 2 years ago. We just now got our most recent one, who's our 12th of the year. But what am I coming at this? It always fascinates me when a racing series announces a change and the fan base loses their minds. I'll give you an example. So I'm recording this. NASCAR unveiled its new electric car, its new EV prototype. It's been in the works for a couple months, couple years. It was originally supposed to be out for the LA Clash back in February, but NASCAR finally unveiled it at Chicago, which, in my opinion, I think is a fantastic place to. The lighting just went really bright here. But anyways, I think that's a fantastic place to actually unveil the EV prototype in a type of event for NASCAR, the Chicago Street Race, unlike anything else in the sport. Unveil a car unlike anything the sport's ever seen, an electric vehicle for NASCAR. But where am I going at with this? NASCAR announced no series, no EV series. They said that they're trying to trying to get their foot in the door in terms of the auto industry getting into the electric market. I have never seen a fan base throw so much of a fit for just the existence of a vehicle than I have with NASCAR with this EV car. I've heard fans say it's a complete waste of time for this car. I've heard fans say they're going to stop watching NASCAR altogether, that this is why NASCAR is dying. I've heard it all. These are the same fans that'd rather go to Chicagoland than race in the streets of Chicago. These are the same fans that'd rather go to, I'm sorry if I hurt any. No, I'm not. If anyone's feelings gets hurt, sorry, not sorry. Go to a dying track than race in the downtown streets of Chicago, which fans for the last 2 years have gone to and have responded in kind. They rather go to a track where they didn't even care about. All of you Chicago fans out there, Chicagoland Speedway fans out there, where were you for the last 3 to 4 years of the track's existence on the schedule? You were nowhere. And then it's off the schedule and you guys want to throw a hissy fit when they want to go race down in the streets of Chicago because you hate change. You guys just want to keep things at the status quo. But the status quo is not working. The status quo is not working. I'll talk about the EV in a second, but now I'm going to go on to the track segments. Chicagoland versus the Chicago street race. What do you think is better for the health of a sport that is trying to grow? Like, folks, if you want to grow, you're going to have to expand. So what do you think is better for expansion for NASCAR? Race in the downtown streets of Chicago, the people. Make it a once-in-a-lifetime event. Or go to Chicagoland, where the racing may or may not be better. And the racing in the street course is pretty good. But race on Chicagoland, barely anyone showed up there anyway, and it'd be just like any other normal NASCAR race. For the sake of the sport, I'd go with option 1. And that's nothing against Chicagoland Speedway. I like the track, but I'll take the downtown streets of Chicago, the street race, any day over Chicagoland Speedway. And of course, you had fans when the rain was going on saying that, oh, we could be in Joliet right now. We could be racing on the Chicagoland Speedway. I mean, think about it, folks. Ever since racing has begun, let's just take it back to the early 2000s. The playoffs were introduced. Fans lost their minds. They went ballistic. The COT got introduced. Fans lost their minds. They went ballistic. Gen 6. Fans lost their minds. They went ballistic. Stage racing. Fans lost their minds. They went ballistic. NASCAR adds more road courses. Fans lose their minds. Like, do you see the pattern here? It's almost as if every change NASCAR makes, whether good or bad, and trust me, I have very strong opinions about the changes NASCAR has made over the past 20, 25 years. But it's like every change NASCAR makes, fans lose their minds. And it's the argument of, oh, NASCAR started dying or it started losing popularity when these changes were made. Now, I will say this. Not all change is good. Do I think the playoffs were good for NASCAR? The 10-driver playoffs, yes. But then they went overboard. Do I think the COT was good for NASCAR? Safety, yes. Everything else, no. Let's keep it within the decade, 2020, when NASCAR was probably in its most boring state. In the 2010s going to the 2020s, we added road courses. We added new tracks. We added a new car. I mean, folks, I remember back in the 2010s when everyone was complaining how bland the schedule was. Everyone complained on how bland the schedule was. It was just nothing but cookie cutter mile and a halves. So what does NASCAR do? They add more road courses, unique road courses. As a matter of fact, you got the state-of-the-art facility in COTA. You got the track in the wilderness in Road America. You got the Indy Road Course. And let me pick on this one for a little bit. A little part of me is kind of hoping the Brickyard 400 fails, but not for the industry. I remember fans for the longest time were clowning on the Brickyard 400, saying that the racing was terrible, saying that the attendance was garbage, saying it should have been off the schedule. So what does NASCAR do? They take it off the schedule and they replace it with the road course. And guess what? Fans complain anyway. You wanted change? NASCAR gave you change and you still complain. And now there's fans going out saying they should have never gotten rid of the Brickyard 400 in the first place. When I guarantee you those same fans, if you go back on their X account, were clamoring for the schedule to be taken off the schedule. But where am I going at with all this? Let's go to the magnum opus, electric vehicles. Am I the biggest fan of EVs? No. I like my cars to be loud. I like the atmosphere of racing that you don't get with an electric vehicle. But at the same time, if all it takes is for the idea of change to scare you as a fan, of saying that this is a waste of time or the sport, you're gonna ditch the sport altogether or whatever, maybe you're not a real fan in the first place. Because if you're a fan of a sport, you should want to see that sport grow and be innovative. These same people, I guarantee you, would just rather have NASCAR go back to the Gen 4 car, go back to Rockingham, go back to the Southeast. And can I say this, folks? I know I'm kind of going all over the place here, but I'm honestly getting sick and tired of the argument of let's have every race in the Southeast. Let's have every race in North Carolina, in Charlotte, in South Carolina, you name it. I'm seriously tired. Is NASCAR's primary demographic in the Southeast? Yes. I live in the Southeast. Yes. Is that where the core of NASCAR's fan base resides? Yes. Is that where NASCAR's heart should reside? Absolutely. But you know how we always talk about with Formula One, how they're gatekeeping teams like Andretti for coming into the sport? Well, NASCAR fans are doing the same thing when they're opposed to any sort of change. They're opposed to EVs. They're opposed to going outside the Southeast. They're opposed to all of this, trying to at least make an attempt to grow and evolve the sports in the modern times. You are literally doing the same thing that Formula One is doing right now with Andretti. You are trying to gatekeep the sport. I don't want 3 races in Charlotte. I don't want 5 or 6 road courses within 3 state lines. Tell you the truth, folks, if you gave me the choice between the LA Coliseum or Bowman Gray, I would take the LA Coliseum. It's more unique and it's in a different demographic. Now, of course, that demographic, it didn't really respond as well over time, but I applaud NASCAR for trying something new. I applaud NASCAR for that. And then we're going to go to Bowman Gray next year, which I don't have a problem with that and whatsoever, but we're going to oversaturate the Southeast market with another short track in the Southeast. Folks, you do know there is a reason why Bristol, Martinsville, Richmond, they don't sell out anymore, because not only do they have 2 dates, but they're all in the same vicinity. Martinsville and Richmond are in the same state, and Bristol's not that far away from them either. So you're talking about 3 tracks with 6 races between all 3 of them, all in the same vicinity. Of course the attendance isn't going to be that good, because you got your pick of the litter. You're like, okay, I could go here one year, I could go here the other year, and I could go here the next year, because they're all in the same area. You can't do the same thing for the LA Coliseum. If you want to go, you got 1 shot, 1 opportunity, and it's in a different area of the country. You're opening it to a new market. That's what the street race is. Now let's go back to the electric vehicles. No series was announced. All NASCAR said is we are trying to more or less evolve with the times, and fans still lose their minds over it, which is hilarious to me, by the way. Are you guys that scared of EVs? When NASCAR has said multiple times that it's not going to replace the Cup Series, and it's not going to be a series anytime soon. And let me go after the people who say that it's a waste of time. I'm telling you right now, that EV is going to do more for bringing in new manufacturers than anything NASCAR has tried to do with reducing the horsepower. I mean, folks, if NASCAR would have invested more in electric vehicles maybe 4 or 5 years earlier, I guarantee you Dodge would announce they would be in the sport in the coming years. I guarantee we'd have a hybrid announcement in the coming years, because that's where the sport is heading. That's where the auto industry is headed. Look at IndyCar. They just got into hybrids. F1's been hybrid since I think 2011. But NASCAR fans hate change. Just the idea of their sport changing makes them mad. It's ridiculous in my opinion, because you want your sport to stay in the Southeast. You want your sport to stay as it is and not change at all, not try to evolve. You want your sport to be solely national drivers, and when international drivers come in, you guys go crazy. Unless their name is SVG. You guys want the sport to grow, but you're unwilling to accept the requirements needed for the sport to grow. This isn't the early 2000s. This isn't the 90s. You can't do the same thing you did back then now. You have to try to find new fans. And what's even crazier is that NASCAR has been policing you guys. North Wilkesboro's been back for a few years. Bowman Gray's gonna come back. Iowa. You guys got the Bristol Concrete Race back because you all lost your minds over the Bristol spring race being dirt, even though y'all never showed up to the spring race when it was on concrete. But again, because most fans hate change, they lose their minds. When change in racing is good, but most of it is good because it's inevitable. Folks, when you have a sport so based in technology like motorsport is, change is inevitable. It's never going to be the same for long stretches of time. That's why eras in racing, they last only like 5, 6, 7 years. Very short stints, because it's necessary. As long as the automobile industry is going to evolve, racing is going to have to evolve along with it. It cannot stay the same. For the health of a racing series, that is not possible. Especially for a national and in some case international racing series, change is a necessity. I get it. Not all change is good. I'm not a fan of the playoffs. I'm not a fan of stages, specifically with the stage yellows. I'm fine with rewarding points in the middle of the race. Some things I'm not a fan of. But if you try taking out the playoffs now, most people aren't really going to care. They're going to be like, okay, why should I care about the championship if it's locked up 2 races early? Yeah, there's that it's probably not going to happen because that rarely happens in NASCAR anyway. But NASCAR in the modern era cannot survive, in my opinion, without a playoff system. It needs to happen. I mean, folks, there's a reason why IndyCar has been talking about it, because that's where racing's probably headed. Gone are the days where it's, I mean, yeah, you have series like Formula One, but guess what? Formula One, it's one of the reasons it's considered so boring is because the championship's locked up 6 races early. But it's the biggest race in the world, series in the world, so they can do it. Change in racing is inevitable. That's what I'm trying to get at. Change in racing is inevitable. It's going to happen. I'd rather sit back and say, let's see where this goes. If it works, awesome. Doesn't work, just throw it in the tin, go back to what worked before. But coming out and bashing change in racing off the bat, in my opinion, is ridiculous. Do you want the sport to grow or not? It's not going to grow going back in time. It's going to grow looking into the future, trying new things, tapping into new markets, tapping into new technology. That is how the auto industry grows, and that's how the racing industry is growing. If you can't accept that, maybe being a racing fan isn't for you. And I feel bad, because I mean, this is going after the hardcore fan. This isn't going after the new fans. To tell you the truth, I'm not a fan. Some of the things that new fans say drives me nuts. I've been a fan since like 2004, 2005. But one thing that I can appreciate about new fans is they're willing to accept change. You didn't hear fans complain about when North Wilkesboro was brought back. They opened it with arms. So why can't the old fans open a Chicago street race with open arms? New fans are willing to open the EVs with open arms. Why can't the old fans do the same? Change is a necessity. And a lot of fans, they need to understand that. And they need to start accepting that really soon, or else they're not going to have a good time being a racing fan at all. All right, so the IndyCar race this past weekend at Mid-Ohio saw one of the closest finishes in racing, with Alex Palou just behind Pato O'Ward. O'Ward winning his first race in 2 years by less, I think it was like 0.3 of a second. On paper, that sounds fantastic. Drivers maybe this far apart from each other, probably maybe a little bit more. That sounds fantastic, wouldn't it? Not exactly. And that's what I want to get to and really hit home about for this part of my discussion. Is close racing actually good? To me, I feel like when we start talking about close racing more than about good racing or the ability to pass, we have a problem. Now you might think to yourself, don't the cars need to be close to them close anyway if they want to pass? Yes, that is correct. However, if you're close, the thing with racing is because dirty air is always going to play such a factor. Normally with racing series, what they'll try to do is they'll try to put a band-aid on the bigger issue, which is dirty air. Let's go back to 2019 with the 550 package with NASCAR. They put the 550 package. The racing was closer. It looked more appealing. But because dirty air was such a big issue with the package, with the car in general, and then on top of that, they had such little horsepower to the point where as soon as you got out of line, all your momentum is gone. Yeah, you can race close all you want, but if you can't pass worth a damn, what does it mean anything? It means nothing. But fans will, or outsiders will look at that. They'll look at the 2020 finish for the playoff race at Kansas and say that was a great finish because Kevin Harvick finished within a car length of Joey Logano. But in reality, Harvick had the faster car and he couldn't get by Joey Logano because, well, yeah, the racing was close. The car didn't allow him, and the air around him didn't allow him to get by the 22 to get the win. But the racing was close, so does that make it good? Let me ask you guys, as race fans, what do you care more about in racing? The cars being close to one another or cars being able to pass one another? Because if you choose the latter, it might come with some costs. Typically, if a car is allowed to pass another car, more times than not, that car is going to be faster than the other, obviously. Well, what happens when you have a car that is so much faster than the other one? He's going to pull away. You know what you get? Formula One. Say what you want about F1, but if a car is truly fast enough, it can get by. I mean, it's like a Max Verstappen. I still think the Red Bull is the better car than between them and the McLaren, because when Max doesn't run into issues, he's untouchable. But you see it, even without DRS in the rain, if a car is truly fast enough, it can catch up to the car behind, and then it can pass the car in front of it. Yeah, they'll pull away to 25, 30 seconds sometimes, but that's because that's how much faster the car is. But it's not the driver in front's fault. Tell the other teams to pick it up. It's like when people always tell me, hey, Armani, slow down. You know what I say back? Speed up. I'm not gonna slow down for you. You gotta pick up the pace. And it's like that with racing. But racing nowadays, especially here in the United States, they're more worried about the racing being close. They rather see more photo finishes than seeing quality passing, a car being able to pass another car, and actual good racing. Because that's what I constitute as good racing. Cars able to pass each other fairly simply. I don't want passing to be as easy as traveling down I-95. Actually, I can't say I-95. But traveling down the highway. I want the drivers to work for it, obviously, but I don't want it to be like an end-all be-all accomplishment. Because, I mean, we saw that over earlier this year. Larson had a faster car than Hamlin, but he couldn't get by because of the dirty air. But he was close, so should that make up for the inability to pass? Especially when you could tell a car is faster than another car, and they can't pass? To me, it's frustrating. I mean, just look at Mid-Ohio. The dirty air was horrible because they added the new hybrid unit. That's nothing against the hybrid itself, but typically when you add more weight to a car, that increases the effects of dirty air. So while Palou had a much faster car than Award, he couldn't do anything with it. Award couldn't even get it past 2 lap cars. That's how bad the dirty air was. But people are going to see a close finish. So was it? Yeah, it's thrilling, you know, to see who's going to make a mistake. But is it really that good? To me, it leaves a sour taste in my mouth. Yeah, the anticipation, the buildup may be thrilling, but the end result is kind of a dud. Is that what we want as race fans? Do we want a dud every single time? If it means that they're within a second of each other? That's why I asked the question. You can see it on the bottom of the screen. Is close racing good? It's a double-edged sword, but if your argument for a series is the racing is close, that to me is a red flag, because close racing doesn't mean good racing. Close racing, more times than not, you'll ask yourself, well, why can't the faster car get past the slower car? I want to see the faster guy up front. I want to see him work his way through the field. I don't want to see the faster guy be held behind the slower guy for 20, 30 laps because of dirty air. But just because it's close, it should be fine. So we'll leave our Speedway spotlight. Again, I'll ask you this question. Is close racing good? We're going to move on to race weekend roundup, but just keep that thought. All right, folks, it's time to end this episode off with our race weekend roundup. And for the first time in a long time, I actually managed to watch all 3 major races this past Sunday: F1, IndyCar, and NASCAR. So I am fresh. I have all the opinions I need of each race, where to rank them, you name it. And for those of you who are new here, how this works is I'll go over the big races of that week on the weekend. I'll give my thoughts, my opinions, and at the end, I'll rank them from 1, 2, 3, 4, you name it. So, without any further ado, let's jump straight into it, and we'll start off with the morning of Sunday, the British Grand Prix for Formula 1. I thought the race as a whole was actually really good, because you have Max Verstappen, who probably had the faster car all the way in 4th, and he had the Mercedes duo of Lewis Hamilton and George Russell starting up front, and you had Lando Norris. So you had a mix of new names, new faces with the Mercedes duo. They look like they're getting back into form. Of course, you saw Lando Norris, who's still relatively new to this whole racing for wins thing. And then you got Max Verstappen. Do I need to say any more? But never in that point of the race, in any point, did I know who was going to win. At first, I thought it could have been Russell. Then at some points, I thought it would be Hamilton. Then Lando Norris. At the end, I thought Max Verstappen was going to easily catch Lewis. And then the rain threw another curveball. That brought in the Ferrari team involved. Oscar Piastri could have won the race. And in Formula 1, where 9 times out of 10, you know who's going to win that weekend, to have a race where I honestly did not know who's going to cross the finish line first was a breath of fresh air. And of course, to see Lewis Hamilton finally get that win. I'd say I'm a Lewis Hamilton fan. I've always enjoyed Lewis. Even during the domination years, I never had the disdain of Lewis dominating as other fans say. Yeah, it got annoying, kind of like, all right, we get it. Can someone else new win now? I wouldn't be opposed to it. But to see Lewis finally get that win, I was on that couch and I'd rather Lewis won than George, personally. And, you know, I talked about in the past where these drivers, they treat each win like it's their last, like it's the greatest thing in the world. They treat a win like it's a Super Bowl. Lewis Hamilton cried for the first time in a race win, and he's won 103 other times in the past. But because you never know when your next win is going to be your last. So you treat each win like it's your last. And to see that emotion out of Lewis and the fact that he really had to work for it in his home country of Britain nonetheless, phenomenal. Truly phenomenal. Now let's move on to the IndyCar race at Mid-Ohio. New hybrids, David Land said it best, basically the same IndyCar. You had David Malukas, you had another guy who looked like they could have done something different with the hybrids, but you still had your same names, same faces and names up front. Your Alex Palous, your Pato O'Wards, your Scott McLaughlins, your New Gardens if he didn't suck at Mid-Ohio, your Scott Dixons if he didn't have his battery issues. It was more or less the same IndyCar. I really did enjoy seeing Pato O'Ward drive Palou down from 6 seconds. I wish NBC would have told me how that happened, because the entire time, if you followed me on Twitter, I was asking, how was O'Ward catching Palou? And NBC did not explain that whatsoever. I think it has something to do with the tire compound. But anyway, my big complaint with the IndyCar race is the dirty air. Faster cars couldn't pass slower cars because of the dirty air. And, you know, as these teams, it's the first race with the hybrids. As they evolve, as the series, as teams, as manufacturers, they all understand this new formula more. I guarantee you that'll hopefully get fixed. But that was very frustrating to see that Alex Palou couldn't get by Pato O'Ward because of dirty air. I've been told that's a Mid-Ohio thing. Hopefully that is staying in Mid-Ohio, and we don't see that at Iowa next week or 2 weeks. Then you got the Cup race at Chicago. I swear to God, every time this Cup Series goes to Chicago, Mother Nature just releases the flood, because it has been downpoured for the first 2 years of the event. We've had to red flag the event 2 years in a row. We've had to shorten the race due to darkness 2 years in a row. We have yet to have a Chicago race go its whole advertised distance, even to an overtime. But I thought for what we got, it was splendid. Yeah, it got chaotic in the back. Josh Berry was doing his best Noah Gragson impression from last year. Basically, all Stewart-Haas was doing their best Noah Gragson from last year impression. But the racing itself, especially when SVG and Larson got knocked out, even though I had SVG in my fantasy, in my pick'em, you didn't know who was going to win. Different strategies, different, you know, names up front. Joey Hand won the stage, for crying out loud. Bowman, the story of Alex Bowman. In my opinion, he has all the right to silence the doubters, because there are people saying he shouldn't even be in the 48 route. There are better options, but I don't think Bowman should be fired. He's a very good driver. He won 4 races not that long ago, folks. But overall, the race was phenomenal. Great event, great weekend. If you still think we should be in Chicagoland or Road America, you're insane. I think the street race is here to stay, and it should be here to stay. But if I were to rank all 3 races, where would I place them? Well, starting out at number 3, I'm going to give it to the IndyCar race at Mid-Ohio. Now, I think all 3 races are really close. If you want to make IndyCar 2 or IndyCar 1, I wouldn't blame you. But I do think that dirty air at the end really brings it down half a notch for me. Although the race in general, I still think was pretty good. You had some low points when Palou was 6 seconds ahead, and again, the dirty air, just not my cup of tea. But I still think overall the race was fantastic. Coming in at number 2, I'm going to give it to the Chicago street race. I thought about putting in a number 1. However, when you had drivers, you know, when everyone's slipping and sliding, everyone's hitting the tire barrier, it does get to the point where it's kind of just a little bit messy. It started to teeter kind of to that Nashville level where we're like, okay, what are we doing? Just barely. Again, racing-wise, event-wise, atmosphere-wise, fantastic. Wouldn't have it any other way. We need to stay in the streets of Chicago. So that means the number 1 spot goes to the British Grand Prix. Pretty much had the same thing that Chicago had, except it didn't turn into a near clown show at the end. You know, could Lando win it? Could Max win it? Could George win it? And then it turned out to be Lewis Hamilton at the end. The racing was fantastic. Strategy, racing, weather, you name it. It had everything. So for me, the British Grand Prix comes in at number 1 on this week's edition of our Race Weekend Wrap. So that'll do it for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed watching. Thank you guys, as always, so much for tuning in to our newest show here on Remix Sports Media, Talking Track. If you guys want to follow us on our social medias, follow us at Talking Track Show. We post clips, especially on the Twitter account. We'll post clips. You guys can watch and listen as I, give my, live race reactions. So go follow us on their Talking Track Show. Follow us on Remix Sports Media as well on X and Instagram as well. That's going to do it for us here, folks, for this episode. We're going to wave the checkered flag. Thank you guys so much. This is Talking Track here on Remix Sports Media.